The flame still licked hungrily at the cathedral's western facade as the German bombers retreated into the night sky. The grand medieval stained glass, depicting saints and apostles for 800 years, now lay in shimmering fragments across the stone floor. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by the spotlight searching the skies for the next wave. Captain Conrad Fitzroy had been directing the firefighting crew when he'd noticed the woman trapped beneath a fallen beam. She had been praying, he later learned, seeking sanctuary from the raid in a place she believed God would protect. Now, as he carefully navigated through the rubble toward the makeshift field hospital set up in the town hall, her blood seeped through his uniform jacket. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice rough from shouting orders and inhaling smoke. Her eyelids fluttered. Foreign words escaped her lips. Polish, he thought. Conrad had been stationed in England for 2 years now, coordinating Allied supply efforts, but the faces of the refugees all blurred together. Just more victims of a war that seemed determined to consume everyone. "Doctor!" Conrad called as he entered the crowded hall. Wounded civilians lay on stretchers and blankets across the floor, moaning and crying. The smell of antiseptic barely masked the scent of blood and fear. Dr. Williams glanced up from stitching a child's arm. "Put her over there, Captain. I'll get to her when I can." "She needs attention now," Conrad insisted, still holding the unconscious woman. Her face, though smudged with soot and blood, struck him as eerily peaceful, as though she'd already accepted death. He couldn't allow that. "We all need things we can't have, Captain," the doctor snapped. "War doesn't wait politely in queue." Conrad knew he was right. Sentiment was a luxury, and he'd seen too many good men die to waste it on strangers. The military had trained the softness out of him. Compassion was inefficient, attachment, dangerous. He'd learned that lesson when his fighter pilot brother's plane had been shot down over the channel last year. No body recovered, just another telegram delivered to their mother. "I'll tend to her myself then," Conrad said, laying her gently on an empty spot near the wall. He retrieved water and bandages, cleaning the gash on her forehead with methodical detachment. This was duty, nothing more. Another civilian to process through the machinery of war. Her eyes opened as he worked, vivid green, wide with confusion and fear. She spoke rapidly in Polish, trying to sit up. Conrad pressed her shoulders gently back down. "English? Do you speak English?" he asked. "Yes." "Some," she replied, her accent thick but understandable. "The cathedral, badly damaged, but still standing," he assured her. "What's your name?" "Zofia. Zofia Malinowski." Her gaze moved to the captain's insignia on his uniform. Something like wariness crept into her expression. "Captain Conrad Fitzroy, British Army." He continued cleaning her wound. "You're lucky. The beam could have killed you." "Not lucky," she whispered. "God protected me." Conrad almost laughed but caught himself. Faith seemed absurd amid such destruction, but he wouldn't rob her of it. "Well, God and a very sturdy pew that took most of the weight." "You saved me," she said simply. "Just doing my job, Miss Malinowski." A nurse approached, offering to take over. Conrad hesitated, then relinquished his position. As he stood, something fell from Zofia's coat pocket, a small notebook with foreign writing. He picked it up, noticing that several pages were covered with what appeared to be coded messages. "This is yours?" he asked, suddenly alert. Intelligence had warned of Polish resistance members operating in the area, allies, certainly, but known for dangerous operations that sometimes compromised military plans. Fear flashed in her eyes as she snatched it back. "Just my diary. Private thoughts." Conrad nodded, but suspicion had already taken root. If she was resistance, she could be valuable or dangerous. Either way, she needed monitoring. "I'll check on you tomorrow," he said, more statement than offer. "Why?" she challenged. "I am nothing to you. Just another refugee." The directness of her question caught him off guard. "Because that's what decent people do in wartime. We look after each other. Is that why you fight?" Decency. Her green eyes held his, demanding honesty. "I fight because it's my duty," he replied automatically. "Duty without heart is just following orders," she murmured, closing her eyes again. "Like the Germans." Conrad stiffened at the comparison. "Rest, Miss Malinowski. You've had a shock." But her words followed him as he left the town hall, returning to his quarters in the requisitioned manor house that served as the local command center. Duty without heart. Was that what he'd become? 2 days later, Conrad found himself at the cathedral again. Work crews cleared debris while engineers assessed structural damage. The bombing had destroyed most of the roof, leaving the interior open to the elements. Rain had fallen that morning, forming small pools on the stone floor, reflecting what remained of the once magnificent ceiling. "Beautiful, even in ruins," came a voice behind him. Zofia stood there, a bandage still on her forehead, wearing a plain grey dress that had seen better days. "Should you be walking around?" Conrad asked. "The doctor said movement is good." She stepped carefully over a fallen timber. "I came to thank God for my life." "In a bombed cathedral." "God is still here," she said simply, looking up at the fractured arches. "Sometimes we see him most clearly through the broken places." Conrad studied her. The wariness remained in her posture, but something else too, a determination that intrigued him. "Are you staying in town?" "For now. They have assigned me work at the munitions factory." Her expression tightened slightly. "I was a professor of literature in Warsaw, before." "The war changes us all," Conrad offered. "Only if we permit it." She turned to him fully. "Why are you here, Captain?" "Not just in this cathedral, but in this war. My country called." "And before that?" "I was an architect." The admission surprised him. He rarely spoke of his previous life. "I designed buildings that were meant to last centuries." "Like this one," she said, gesturing to the damaged cathedral. "Perhaps you will help rebuild it someday. If there's anything left to rebuild when this is over." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Major Harrington, Conrad's superior. The major glanced suspiciously between them. "Fitzroy. Needed at HQ immediately." His eyes lingered on Zofia. "Who's this?" "Miss Malinowski. She was injured in the raid." The major nodded curtly. "Best be on your way, miss. Restricted area." After she left, Harrington turned to Conrad. "Careful with the locals, Captain. Intelligence reports increased resistance activity. Some of these refugees have complicated loyalties." "She's just a civilian, sir." "They're all just civilians until they're passing information or planting bombs." Harrington handed him a folder. "New shipments coming tonight. The Germans know our supply routes too well lately." Conrad took the folder, discomfort settling in his chest. "Understood, sir." That night, unable to sleep, Conrad walked the grounds of the manor house. The spring air carried the distant sound of anti-aircraft guns from the coast. He found himself thinking of Zofia's question, why was he here? The answer had once seemed so clear. A movement near the garden wall caught his attention. A figure slipping through the shadows. Conrad followed silently, hand on his sidearm. The figure, a woman, headed toward the communications building. When she passed beneath a lamp, moonlight illuminated her face. Zofia. Conrad felt a cold weight in his stomach. She was exactly what Harrington feared, a spy. But for which side? He stepped out, blocking her path. Rather late for a stroll, Miss Malinowski. She froze, her hand instinctively moving toward her pocket. Captain Fitzroy. Looking for something? Fresh air. The factory dormitory is very crowded. 2 miles from your dormitory, near a military communications center. He stepped closer. I should call the guards. Fear crossed her face, but she stood her ground. You won't. Give me one reason. Because you recognize what I am doing is right, even if it breaks your rules. Conrad felt anger rising. Spying is right? For whom? The resistance? Or someone else? I am Polish. My country was the first to fall. Her voice trembled slightly. My family was taken to a camp near Krakow. I escaped. The resistance helped me reach England, and now I help you, fight back. By stealing military information. By ensuring it reaches those who need it most. She met his gaze. Your commanders don't trust the Polish underground. They withhold intelligence that could save lives. Conrad knew there was truth to her accusation. The Allied command's reluctance to fully incorporate resistance intelligence had been a point of contention. You could be shot for this, he said quietly. Many have died for less. She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the faint scent of factory oil on her clothes. Will you turn me in, Captain? Is duty without heart enough for you? Her words from the hospital echoed back. Conrad thought of his brother, of the telegram, of the emptiness that had followed. Of buildings designed to withstand centuries now reduced to rubble in seconds. Go back to your dormitory, he said finally. Now. If you're caught, I won't be. She hesitated, then added, thank you. Don't. I'm not helping you. I'm just not stopping you. This time. He watched her disappear into the darkness, knowing he had just crossed a line from which there was no return. Over the following weeks, Conrad found himself seeking Zofia out. Their meetings were ostensibly to gather information about Polish refugee needs, but each encounter left him more conflicted. She never directly asked about military matters, yet he sensed she absorbed everything, the troop movements he mentioned casually, the supply concerns, the command frustrations. They met in the cathedral, now partially covered with tarps where the roof had once been. Workers had cleared the debris, and a makeshift altar had been erected for Sunday services. My father was a carpenter, Zofia said, running her hand along a wooden pew that had survived the bombing. He built things to last, like you. He said craftsmanship is a form of prayer. Is that why you come here? Conrad asked. To pray. And to remember. In Warsaw, before the Germans came, I would visit the royal castle every Sunday after church. Such beauty. Her voice softened. All destroyed now. We'll rebuild, Conrad found himself promising. After we win. Will we? Win, I mean. We must. He looked up at the open roof, at the sky beyond. The alternative is unthinkable. Zofia's eyes followed his. Sometimes I think of all the people looking at this same sky. German soldiers, prisoners in camps, children in bombed cities. All under the same heaven. The Germans chose this war, Conrad said, the response automatic. Some did. Many simply followed. Like your duty without heart. She turned to him. What do you believe in, Conrad? Beyond duty. No one had asked him that since before the war. The question penetrated defenses he hadn't realized he'd built. I believe in. He began, then faltered. I believe the world can be better than this. That what we build doesn't have to be destroyed. That is worth fighting for, she said softly. Their conversations continued through April and into May. Conrad found himself sharing things he'd told no one, about his brother's death, about the buildings he designed that would never be constructed, about the emptiness that had driven him to volunteer for increasingly dangerous assignments. In turn, Zofia spoke of her life in Warsaw, of her students, of the night she'd come home to find her parents gone and neighbors warning her not to stay. Of her journey through occupied Europe with forged papers and resistance help. I was angry for so long, she admitted one evening as they walked along the river. At God, at the Germans, at everyone who didn't stop this madness. And now? Now I understand that anger builds nothing. It only destroys. She looked at him. Like your architecture, resistance must create something worth saving. That night, returning to his quarters, Conrad found Major Harrington waiting with military police. Captain Fitzroy, Harrington said formally. These gentlemen have some questions about your relationship with a Polish national named Zofia Malinowski. Cold fear gripped Conrad. She's a refugee I assisted after the Cathedral bombing, sir. And since? Your meetings in that same cathedral? Your walks? Your conversations about troop movements and supply lines? Standard refugee coordination, sir. Nothing classified. Harrington's expression hardened. We have testimony suggesting otherwise. Miss Malinowski has been arrested on suspicion of espionage. A coded transmission was intercepted last night containing information only someone with access to your briefings could have known. Conrad maintained his composure with effort. Sir, there must be some mistake. For your sake, I hope so. You're confined to quarters pending investigation. After they left, Conrad sat on his bed, mind racing. If Zofia had been arrested, what had they found? What did they know? And more urgently, was she safe? The next morning, Conrad was escorted to the interrogation room where Zofia was being held. Through the observation window, he could see her seated at a metal table, hands folded, face composed despite the bruise on her cheek. She's refused to speak except to request your presence, Harrington said. Claims she'll reveal everything to you alone. She's not a spy, sir. That's for intelligence to determine. You're to get her to confess her contacts and what information was compromised. And if she doesn't? Harrington's expression was grim. Espionage in wartime carries the maximum penalty, Captain. For anyone involved. The threat was clear. Conrad entered the room, heart pounding. Zofia looked up, relief briefly crossing her face before she masked it. Captain Fitzroy, she said formally. Miss Malinowski. He sat across from her, aware of Harrington watching through the glass. You're in serious trouble. So I gather. Her voice was steady, but he saw fear in her eyes. They believe you've been passing military information. They intercepted a transmission. I know what they believe. Conrad leaned forward. Zofia, you need to cooperate. Tell them who you've been working with, what information was shared. It's the only way. She studied him, then said quietly, there was a time you would have followed orders without question. What changed? The question struck him like physical blow. What had changed was her, the way she saw through his carefully constructed defenses, the way she challenged his acceptance of duty without meaning. "This isn't about me," he said. "If you don't cooperate, they will execute me as a spy," she finished. "I understand the consequences." "Then why?" "Because what I've done has saved lives. Polish lives. Jewish lives. Even British lives." She leaned forward. "The resistance needed information about German positions that your command was withholding. If that's true, why not go through official channels? We tried. For months." Bitterness edged her voice. "While people died waiting for your official channels to trust us." Conrad glanced at the observation window, knowing Harrington was listening to every word. "What you're saying only confirms their suspicions." "I know." She reached across the table, her fingers almost touching his. "Conrad, I never betrayed you. Everything I did was to fight the same enemy." He pulled his hand back, mind racing. If what she said was true, she had technically committed espionage, but for Allied benefit. However, the military wouldn't see that distinction, especially not Harrington, who had never trusted the resistance. "Write down your contacts. Everything you shared. I'll try to convince them you were working for the Allied cause." Zofia shook her head. "I can't betray those who trusted me." "Then I can't help you." Her eyes held his. "You already have. You showed me that duty can have heart. That even in war, humanity survives." Conrad stood abruptly. "I'll speak with Major Harrington." Outside, the Major was waiting. "Well, she's not working for the Germans, sir. She's Polish resistance, passing information to her network to coordinate their operations with ours. That's still a security breach, Captain. One that helps our cause. The resistance has been begging for better intelligence coordination for months." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "You seem very convinced of her innocence." "Perhaps too convinced." "I'm convinced of her allegiance to defeating the Nazis, sir." "As am I." "Your allegiance isn't what concerns me, Fitzroy. Your judgment does." Harrington sighed. "The evidence against her is substantial. The tribunal will likely convene tomorrow." That night, Conrad couldn't sleep. The image of Zofia facing a firing squad haunted him. She had acted wrongly, yes, but for the right reasons, reasons he had come to understand through their conversations. The military machine would see only the breach, not the humanity behind it. By dawn, he had made his decision. Using his captain's authority, he ordered the guard changed, selecting a young private he knew to be intimidated by rank. He fabricated transfer papers and, in the confusion of the morning shift change, walked Zofia out of the detention building. "What are you doing?" she whispered as they crossed the compound. "Something very stupid," he replied. "There's a resistance safe house in the village, yes." Her eyes widened. "Yes, but can they get you to London? To the Polish government in exile?" "Conrad, stop. You'll be court-martialed. Or worse." He continued walking, guiding her toward the motor pool. "Probably. But I've realized something, Zofia. Duty without heart isn't just empty, it's dangerous. It's how good people justify terrible things." They reached a jeep. Conrad helped her in, then climbed into the driver's seat. "The Polish government in exile can vouch for your activities. Explain that you were coordinating resistance efforts, not betraying secrets." "And you? What will you do?" Conrad started the engine. "Face the consequences. But first, I'm going to make sure you reach safety." They drove through the morning mist toward the village, both knowing that alarms would soon sound behind them. Conrad had crossed a line from which there was no return, yet he felt strangely at peace. For the first time since his brother's death, his actions aligned with his heart rather than merely his orders. The safe house was a small cottage on the outskirts of the village. An elderly woman answered their urgent knock, eyes widening at the sight of Zofia. "British military is looking for her," Conrad explained quickly. "She needs to reach London immediately." The woman nodded, ushering Zofia inside. At the threshold, Zofia turned back to Conrad. "Come with me," she pleaded. "The resistance can hide you too." Conrad shook his head. "I can't live as a fugitive, Zofia. What I believe in, what you helped me remember I believe in, requires me to face what I've done openly. They'll imprison you. Or worse. Perhaps. Or perhaps they'll listen to reason when the Polish government confirms your work was for the Allied cause." He took her hand. "Either way, I need to try." Tears filled her eyes. "I never meant for this to happen." "I know." He squeezed her hand. "In another time, another world. When the war is over," she said fiercely, "I will find you. I'll be waiting. In the cathedral." He smiled slightly. "What's left of it?" Their goodbye was brief, a desperate embrace, a promise whispered against her hair. Then Conrad was back in the jeep, driving toward the base and whatever punishment awaited him. As expected, Conrad was arrested immediately upon return. The charges were grave: aiding an enemy agent, desertion, betrayal of his oath. He explained Zofia's connection to the Polish resistance, her efforts to coordinate intelligence that was being wrongly withheld, but Harrington remained unmoved. "You've thrown away your career, Fitzroy. Possibly your life. For what I believe is right, sir." The military tribunal convened within days. Conrad faced the charges without denial, explaining his actions not as a betrayal but as an effort to ensure that justice was properly served. To his surprise, halfway through the proceedings, a Polish officer in exile uniform entered with documents from the government in exile confirming Zofia's role as a legitimate resistance courier. Though this mitigated the most serious charges of aiding an enemy agent, Conrad was still found guilty of dereliction of duty and disobeying orders. He was sentenced to a year in military prison, stripped of his rank, and discharged from service. As guards led him from the courtroom, the Polish officer approached. "Captain Fitzroy. Miss Malinowski asked me to give you this." He handed Conrad a small envelope. "She has safely reached London and is working with our intelligence service now." Conrad clutched the envelope, nodding his thanks. The prison was austere but not brutal. Conrad served his time quietly, receiving occasional letters from Zofia that passed the military censors. She wrote of her work with the Polish government in exile, of her hopes for after the war, of rebuilding what had been broken, both in their countries and in their lives. In her letters, she often returned to the cathedral. "I dreamed of it last night," she wrote. "Not as it was when bombed, but as it could be again. Your architect's heart would see the possibility there, just as you saw something in me worth saving." The war progressed. News filtered into the prison of D-Day, of the Allied push through Europe, of victory approaching. Conrad's sentence was reduced for good behavior, and in April 1945, as Germany's collapse became inevitable, he was released. The world outside had changed. Cities lay in ruins across Europe, but hope bloomed amid the destruction. Conrad returned to the town where he had met Zofia, drawn to the cathedral where their story had begun. The building still stood partially damaged, though reconstruction had started. Scaffolding embraced the western facade, and workers moved along the roof beams, installing new supports. Conrad stood in the nave, remembering Zofia's words about seeing God through the broken places. "I thought I might find you here," came a voice behind him. Conrad turned, hardly daring to believe. Zofia stood in a shaft of light from the damaged ceiling, more beautiful than his memory had preserved. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair longer now, her eyes still that vivid green that had haunted his dreams in prison. "You came back," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I promised I would find you." She approached slowly. "The war is nearly over. Germany is collapsing. Poland will be free again, though not as we hoped." Conrad closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. They were rougher now, marked by work and war, like his own. "And what happens now?" "Now we rebuild," she said simply. "Just as you always wanted to do. Create rather than destroy." "Together?" he asked. "If you'll have me." She looked up at the partially repaired ceiling. "This cathedral has survived wars before. It will stand again, perhaps stronger for having been broken." "Like us," Conrad said softly. They were married the following Sunday in the cathedral, still damaged but beautiful in its resilience. The local newspaper photographer captured the moment, a former British captain and a Polish resistance fighter standing beneath the broken arches, light streaming through the gaps where stained glass would one day be restored. The photograph made its way to London papers, then across the Allied nations, a symbol of what the war had been fought for, the possibility of love and renewal amid destruction. "Hope rises from ruins," the headline read, and beneath it, Conrad and Zofia, faces turned toward a future they would build together, in a world finally at peace.